Have the holes more like supposed to round it, more but like that. Plus the rod. And that's one rod you pass You're not one of those people. Oh, that's pretty good. Yeah, they're all in it. Very clear, we'll take that back.
Right.
Go ahead. Thank you very much. That's great. You want to go? Yeah, some more? One more? Okay. Sounds good. Keep on. I didn't whistle over that. That's one.
Great that you and Angie, I was there. Hang on.
Everyone is required to stand at attention, and also this will be followed by all candidates. The point of interest, there was 195 children under 12 years old that came over on the first boat. And there was one born on the boat, and her name was she was named Castelia Butler Ferguson Brown Morrison for several reasons. Butler, all those people were on the boat, and that was where I was taken. They arrived in St. John, New Brunswick on May the 10th, 1973, and they'd sailed on April, so it was about a 15-day trip over. From St. John, they made their way up to Kilburn. It was tough. New difficulties occurred, of course. They found that the land was not quite ready up here. Some of the houses were not built, and they said to they advised the ladies and the women and the children that they should maybe stay behind and they come a little later. But anyway, the ladies being pretty strict in their own ways of doing things, they said no. They say, we'll come along and we'll go. So they did, and it was pretty rough, there's no doubt about it. First of all, they were surprised to this is in May, and they were surprised to find a foot of snow up in where they eventually landed in Barnacourt. However, they had a lot of work to do. Much encouragement was given you to continue on, and after much work, a total of 543 settlers had settled in. More came, of course, the following year in 1984, which again went into Contour and Upper Contour on the Sidonia. So the population grew. Some returned, some went back to St. John, but the majority stayed and worked hard. The first 3 years were difficult, hard years, with no schools and churches were built and crops were sown between the stumps, but they were tough. Children were taught at home, church meetings held in the houses. A great deal of support was given by the Presbyterian Church, of course, of New Brunswick. And arranging baptism, temporary ministers to fill in, giving services and communion as required. It's interesting to know, though, that even though there was no permanent ministers here, that I think for the first 2.5 years there was 40 children baptized in the Scotch colony, which was really something. The first minister came to the colony in November of 1875. This was a man sent from God. They called him a man to match the mountains. The Reverend Peter Melville arrived. He was a very organized person who led the colonists into a very active church life. And in August of 1876, Mr. Peter Melville's plan was he laid it all out. He had a plan to build 4 schools, houses without delay, 1 for each colony, and also to build a church at the junction of the roads, which is still there now. The 4 schoolhouses were opened in the year of 1877. And the one in the Scotch colony here, the one in Kincardine and the one in Contour. The one in Kincardine, I know, and the one in Contour, both open tomorrow, so you can go in. And Darlene and they've done a lot of work to restore those, and they painted the outside, and they really look nice. And if you like to go in there, you might be able to further your education from where you picked up a few years ago. I went there for 8 years, and I can't keep telling my grandchildren about going there for 8 years, and they wondered why I stayed in Mongrey 8 years. It's pretty tough. But I never did learn too much, but what I did learn, I learned it there. And then, of course, the schools were used for, Sunday schools and all community activities. The church was completed on January the 1st, 1878, and was dedicated and named the Melville Church, of course, after Peter Melville. The cost of the church at that time was $1,025. It was a bargain, I think. Well, the church building with the final payment was made in 1878. It was fantastic, really. In May, unfortunately, of 1978, in May, Reverend Peter Melville accepted a call to Stanley and Nashwauk, so he left here at this area. During the period from 1878 to 1896, the Melville Church was serviced by several ministers until June of 1896, when the Reverend Gordon Pringle accepted a call to be a minister at a salary of $500 a year. And this is when I started coming into the picture, because I remember, that was 1896. That's quite a while back, but as Mr. Pringle grew older, I grew older, and that's where I sort of came into the picture. Good or bad. I don't know whether I had any influence on him or not, but he had served as a missionary also earlier. He came in for a period in between time, just to serve for a short time. And during which, at that time, the upper contora was planned, the church was planned and built in 1893. A manse in the barn was also built during the period, which of course is one of the historic buildings on the colony today. And then I guess we'll be touring those too. Lower Contour Church was dedicated in 1909. Reverend Gordon Pringle's ministry over a period of 1896 to 1951 was well served during a period of which saw fantastic attendance at the churches. It was great attendance. Everybody went to church, goes everywhere. That's where the community work was done. A very close, hard-working group of colony people who survived 2 world wars by doing their part both home and overseas. And as Catherine Warman points out in her article she has written some time ago, that as with sadness, that nine people from Bonnecourt alone went overseas, and 4 didn't come back. That was Bonnecourt alone. And then, of course, the other colonies had their own people too that were in the First and Second World War. And I know some of those. I know, for instance, George McConnell, for one, was served in both World Wars. If you read the history of the Scotch colony, 1873 to 1969, which I'm sure you probably have, and by the way, it's now been carried on, and they've enlarged the book, and they've extended it on to the recent times now, and it's being sold here. So it's a worthwhile article to have. A lot of you have, I'm sure I've read it. It is outstanding and unbelievable the number of people who served as elders and deacons and the length of time they served. You know, like James Farker, 46 years. John Drop, 37 years, serving as deacons and elders. John Hutchison for 50 years. And the list goes on and on and on. And as you read the book, you see that. The organists who served, right up to recent times. The Sunday school teachers, the school teachers who served. I can remember my first school teacher, Dorothy Farker. She's probably here today. And I think that's where I really learned. 2 years she was there, grade 1 and 2. That's really when I started to learn. And then all of a sudden, I don't know what happened. I lost interest. And I think I had to sit beside Helen, and that wasn't good because she'd keep copying off my work. The volunteers who served, you know, and still serve, like back in those days, Mrs. J.B. Adams, they had a store in Bonnecourt. She was sort of a community doctor, and she was a midwife. You know, when many of the children were born, and everyone called her the Scottish equivalent of mother. School board and counselors, Jim Barclay. You know, I remember Jim Barclay. He was always going. You know, and I could never figure out why he was going so fast, but he was always going. And but man, he done so much service for these communities. He recalls the Upper Contour Church was dedicated in 1893, and he says, of course, I was the first baby to be baptized in that church. So. Now, coming to my time, I remember things that my children don't really believe, you know. Like, for telephone, for example, they say in the book here that, in the book, history book, in January of 1913, well, they hooked up a telephone. Well, I never seen that, and we never seen that up our way until 1952, if I'm not mistaken. And that was right after my second life. My first life was in 1951, I think it was. Bernard Hargrove come up and wired our house, and they turned the lights on. I thought I was born again. The lights all went on. Following that, the telephone was hooked up, and they only had 2 numbers. But I think it went down to Davison's is where it went, and they had it in the manse too. So that's the way it goes. They tell the people working for $1.75 an hour, which was a lot, and it's maybe enough nowadays. You never know. But like Johnny Ellis, this is what he built the Bobby Burns Hall for. He had a contract and to build it. He worked at $1.75. The first mill, for instance, the first mill that Fraser's had was in Bonnecourt. Nobody probably realizes that, but Donald Fraser and Johnny Drum set it up. And I'll always remember people like Aunt Jean Drum. She lived in Bonnecourt, but I spent a lot of time up there, and we never had plowed roads in those days, and Helen and I'd have to walk home from school. Big fight, but Catherine Warman, I can never forget Catherine and Herbie Warming living in Bonnecourt, and the flower gardens that she had, just beautiful. Russell Hargrove, I worked for Russell, and he learned me how to drive tractor. I'll never forget that. And Mrs. Matheson, of course, she gathered everybody down there in the school and had mission band. And the grade 1 teacher, as I mentioned before, Dorothy Parker, I've got to give her a lot of credit because I'd never be where I was today if it wasn't for her. But I could go on and I could go on and on and on in that. You know, I could go on and on, but there's things that happened, and even today, I have people. I of course have a place up the road towards Bonnecourt. There we still have the family farm, and we come up there, and over the years I brought a lot of people up here. Like we live in Nova Scotia now, but I bring people up here all the time to visit here, and it was summertime. They used to start coming, and we would they would spend a week or so here, and then they'd go back home, and they'd call me up and say, when are we going back up here? So everybody I brought up here wants to come back, and now it's starting to be winter time. They want to come up here in January and February now. They come up here snowmobiling and whatnot, and right now they're back there planning to come again this winter. You know, so the Scotch Colony is a very, very beautiful place, the hills of the colonies, Bonnecourt, both Contour, Lower and Upper, and all around here, and you can't blame them why they want to come back. And I am sure that this weekend you will probably meet a lot of people, you'll see a lot of things, and I really hope that you enjoy yourself. And the idea of the anniversary, of course, is to talk to people, get to know people, and there'll be things going on all day, a barbecue here, there'll be things in the Burns Hall tonight, and of course the church service tomorrow. So I'm going to go back to the agenda here now. If it wasn't for Dorothy Parker, I'd never be able to read this. But I got to make a couple of notations here. There's donation boxes at the gate.
To read the names of the First World War veterans and the Second World War ones, and any other ones. And if I should happen to miss someone, it's not intentional. I'm reading it from the new book, The History of the Scotch Colony, and it's the updated version. And I'll put a little plug in like Ken did. They are for sale at So I'll start reading from the First World War veterans. You hear all right? The veterans of the First World War: John McClellan, William Paul, Alexander Mackay, Alexander Drum, George Sheriff, Alexander Sheriff, Malcolm Adam, Chester McPhail, Lawrence McPhail, John Taylor, William McConnell, James Watt Robertson, Angus MacDonald. Miss Jean Drum says this was the First World War. This was a real disruption in the colony life in the First World. World War II, 1939 to 45. Alexander J. Clark, Anna A. Clark, Bruce Clark, Ian A. Clark, Robert Clark, Gordon DeMerchant, Philip DeMerchant, Duncan McPhail, Alex R. Masterson, Cecil Perkins, Leonard C. Riddle, Philip A. Smith. Some of these veterans are still living and are still with us. We're just honoring all of them today. Angus Stevenson, Gordon J. Stevenson, Ronald E. Stevenson, Gordon Adam. And from the Upper Kintor, Andrew Phillips, James Phillips, Angus G. Stevenson, Lloyd E. Patterson, Roy Anderson, and killed in action as well as many of the others, James Arthur Gordon. Upper Kintor sent 10 sons to World War II. Harry Kinney, Alexander Christie, Milton Corey, Louis DeMerchant, Richard DeMerchant, Lawrence Mowbray, Joseph Farquhar, Arthur Smith, McFarland Williamson, Thomas Williamson Jr. and Thomas Williamson Sr. And those gentlemen, all the last ones I read, all returned safely from the Second World War. Many of them have probably passed on now. Lower Kintor soldiers. John Hartshaw, War I. John McClellan, War I. James W. Robertson, War I. Second World War: Philip Lepage, Hayden Davenport, Philip McQuaid, George Rideout, Morris G., Robert Patterson, Loomis McQuaid, Herbert G., Hilton Rideout, Benjamin Davenport, killed in the Korean War, Hayden Davenport. Now, if I have inadvertently missed someone, please forgive us for that. This is a copy of the new history of the colony, and as I said before, they are available. Melvin Barkley is selling them, and they're well worth having. There's a lot of interesting reading in them. Thank you. Bye.
Okay, moving right on. I'm told I'm a little behind schedule. I can't believe that because I'm a little behind schedule. But I will speed her up.